Episode, gentlemen. This week, the name on the marquee is not one of the two men that was in the main event this past weekend at UFC Mexico. It was the winner in the co-main event, Brian T-City Ortega, who defeated Yair Rodriguez by submission via arm triangle choke. The official time, 58 seconds of round number 3. Mark, start us off. Give us your impressions of this fight. It was pretty back and forth. Yair scoring heavily in the first round. Ortega rallying back in the second and ultimately getting that finish in the third. What's your take?
What a fight. What a performance from Ortega. Certainly deserving of a jumping Royval for the marquee here. But I got to tell you quick before I get into this fight, I'm pretty sure it was me that made Brian Ortega roll his ankle. I shit you not. I was watching Volk get introed last week, and he did the exact same jump up and down thing, like pull the legs way up, 2-foot jump that a lot of fighters do. And it came into my mind, and I was like, wow, like I never really thought about this before, but so many fighters do that big dramatic jump. It's kind of odd that no one's ever gotten hurt and like rolled their ankle or popped a knee or like who knows what doing that. And the very next fucking card, what happens? Brian Ortega does it and rolls his ankle. So that was me. My bad on that. Thank God it didn't steal the fight from us because that would have sucked. But holy fuck, that was wild, man. Especially in such a big spot. That was wild to see. But about the fight, I love Brian Ortega. He is one of my favorite fighters. He has been for a long time. And he's just special, man. Both in his life and as a fighter. If you've been watching Brian for any amount of time, you know the way that he fights. He will absorb damage, sometimes an ungodly amount of damage. Sometimes he'll be losing for large chunks of the fight, but he will keep coming forward until he finds an opening, until he finds a way to turn the tide in that fight. And you also got to give him credit for doing that same thing here in his personal life to get back to this point, because he got hurt 2 years ago against Yair. And in the time since, he lost a very high-profile relationship that obviously a lot of people know about. He had multiple friends die, according to him, a couple of them very close friends, one apparently his best friend. He had 4 surgeries and was at what sounds like the lowest point of his entire life, and also said that he had more than one time where he was like, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this because my body is just not holding up and letting me do this, and was debating if he should do something else with his life. Then he comes back from all that and immediately rolls his ankle as he's being introduced in the octagon. Do you know what a mind fuck that is? Like, if you've competed in any sport in your life, you know how much something like that right before you're about to start can fuck with you, especially with everything he just came back from, all those thoughts about, can my body do this? And for that to happen, it's so easy for all those thoughts to creep right back in his mind. Like, my body is betraying me. Like, it's not happening right now. And then Yair opens the door even wider for Brian to do that by fucking him up in round 1. He came out like a buzzsaw and Brian was flat. Maybe it had to do with the ankle. Maybe it had to do with the mental. Maybe he just was flat. Who knows? But he paid for it bad and he got dropped a couple times, bleeding. He hurt in round 1. And to all of that I just described, Brian Ortega was able to say no. He ignored it all. His mind was stronger than any of those negatives. He pushed through it, and he was on top of Yair before round 1 even ended. And then round 2, more pressure, typical Ortega style, walking forward, finding his way inside through obviously the danger that Yair is throwing, found his takedown, and then really once he was on top, Yair wasn't offering much resistance, and he just wore Yair down in that round as much as he could. And by round 3, it was easy. One more takedown directly into mount, perfect transition to an arm triangle, and Brian Ortega is back after everything. And it's a tough one for Yair because remember, there used to be some red flags about the grappling of Yair. Like, remember what we saw Frankie Edgar do to him however many years back. And you kind of got to think about that again now, coming off a loss like this. Like, he really did not look good when he was on bottom. He did not have much to offer to Ortega. So you think about other guys in this division like Evloev or if he was ever matched with Topuria or plenty of others, what he does from bottom. And that was not a great look. So that's its own issue. But what a night and what a return for Brian Ortega. A performance to remember for him for sure.
Omar, let me bring you in here. Give us your impressions of the kickboxing on display from Yair Rodriguez in the first. Wasn't able to seal the deal, and he left the opportunity for Ortega to come back in the second. And what happened in the third happened. Give us your take.
I mean, you got to love the striking from Yair. Yair is as crisp as ever. As far as the finishing aspect of it, man, I mean, he gave it his best shot.
Oh yeah,
Ortega is not an easy one to put away. You could probably nitpick things in those sequences maybe that he could have done better that might have led to a finish. But the reality is it's controlled chaos in there. And I think Yair did as good as anybody was going to do against a beast like Ortega, a guy that comes forward. Now that Korean Zombie's gone, Ortega might be next in line for a similar moniker. You know what I mean? I thought Rodriguez did very well in the beginning. Obviously, kind of put the beats on Ortega really quick. But it was the work to the body I was super impressed with. It was a lot of kicks to the body, a lot of front kicks to the body. We've all seen, like Mark said, Ortega take a ungodly amount of damage. And guys are very tough taking damage to the head and all that kind of stuff. But the body is really where there's not enough toughness in the world to stop you from eating multiple shots to the body. I say that full well knowing that Ortega survived that first round. But it wore on him, and it definitely ate at him. And you could see how that second round, he had to find something else. He didn't go in there, trying to outstrike Ortega or Rodriguez at that point, right? Ortega's got hands for sure. The kid's boxing is crisp, but Ortega just had he had he had that distance management on lock. Like that was all him. Anything he wanted to do, he was able to do it and get out of the way. He could do a little bit better when it comes to the dodging and the slipping. He does a lot of straight back movements when he's trying to dodge or slip a punch, and that's still getting him in trouble. He needs to do, I think, a little bit more side to side and a little less just straight back. But that's really nitpicking stuff. I thought the performances were fantastic, even from Ortega, man. His ability to adjust in the second round, make it a ground game, show how high level he still is. The transitions were fantastic. The actual control from bottom was fantastic. And the way he was able to pick that up right in round 3, like if nothing had happened, and like if round 2 had basically never stopped, picked it right up in round 3 and just got that choke right away. I mean, his jiu-jitsu at this point really might be some of the best in the UFC at this point, just overall.
So good, dude. And there was clips of him drilling that exact sequence in his locker room right before the fight with, I think it was with Henner Gracie. Man, gutted for Yair, because I fucking love Yair Rodriguez, man. I love watching him fight, but I also love Brian. I also love Ortega. And this was definitely one of those things where I was not going to be happy seeing either one of these guys leave. What were we going to say?
I was just there were choices that Yair made in that fight that I feel like lost him that fight. And it's really starting to, and a lot of it has to do with his propensity to go down to the ground. There was one point where he tried to go for a guillotine on Brian Ortega. What the fuck are you doing?
Yo, that guillotine was kind of tight though, man.
But he's never in the right position. Yeah, his arms were in the right position, but his body never was. Like at no point.
It looked like he had a chance to be though. I don't know. I don't know. I know what you mean. If you don't have Brian Ortega that you're trying to guillotine, it's probably not going to work. I get it.
And that's kind of my point, right? It's like if you don't have it, like if you know you don't have it, you're going to lose position. And he never got back up. He never got back up once he got down on the ground after going for that submission. Yeah. It's just not worth it. Like if you're beating this kid, and to Yair's credit, he was not afraid to do some ground and pound on the ground, right? To play with Ortega on the ground and really get down there. And I loved that. I was all about that. But then you start playing with him in his world, and you landing ground and pound and keeping a base and not allowing Ortega to get anything from full guard is not the same as going for a guillotine, ending up in bottom, and then surviving for the rest of the round.
Yeah.
That approach to the ground is completely different than what he was doing in the beginning in round 1. And I just feel like I don't know why, because it's not the first time we've seen him do that either, where he's like okay going down to the ground and just being on bottom and like trying to figure something out and like spending time down there trying to, but like he spends the whole round down there and just loses. And it's
That's
not
what I mean
because he's
about it being
necessarily a
concerning.
bad fighter. You know what I mean?
If he has nothing off his back, he can't fight like that. And I'm not sure he can stay upright against dudes who are dead set on taking him down. So it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And he's not bad off of his back, but
No,
when
against
somebody's
most guys,
better,
he smokes them. I mean,
right.
at the elite level.
Right. Yeah. When we're talking about a guy like Brian Ortega, like he's, you know, you're not going to get a submission like you got on Josh Emmett. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So it's, I don't know. I wish some of his decision making in those big moments was a little bit more cautious, in the sense that he wouldn't do something like jump guillotine in a moment like that where he's winning the fight, where he's dominating the fight up until that point, and then just let it go.
I will add that I'm very mad at myself because the way that I described and predicted this fight the first time they fought, and then called back to it last week as how I still saw it in a vacuum, is pretty much exactly what happened. And I said I was too afraid to pick it because of the layoff, and I picked Yair. And I hate that I did, because I would have loved to brag about the Ortega pick, because it seemed like most of the world was on Yair coming into this. But well.
Okay, let's talk about where these guys go from here. Mark Ortega, I believe, did not call anyone out specifically in his post-fight Octagon interview. Where do you think he goes from here? How close is he to another title shot?
I mean, it may be a title shot. Like, it's not that crazy that it could shake out that way. It hinges on two things. One, how much time does Volk want to take off? And two, can Max beat Justin Gaethje? And even kind of 2A, if he does beat Justin Gaethje, is he going to be calling out to Poirier or looking to do some other thing at lightweight? Because if Volk does want the fight and Max does want the fight, I do think the order is still Volk number 1, Max number 2, Ortega number 3. But if Volk doesn't want to come back till later in the year, and if Justin beats Max, Ortega might get this title fight right now. So it's very possible. If he doesn't get it, my guess is he probably is going to have to fight Evloev, which is a great freaking fight. But it's possible. We got to see what happens here.
Omar, your thoughts?
There's not really much flexibility from that, to be honest. The featherweight division is pretty rigid right now, especially with Alexander Volkanovski having just recently lost. Rematches are on the horizon. Not really much else you can do in that situation other than what Mark just described.
It's true. So, Yair Rodriguez loses this one. Omar, where do you think he's going to go from here?
I think it might be time for a fight with him and Arnold Allen. I don't think we've gotten that yet. And I think we're there. I think it's that time.
Love that fight. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment as much as we were just talking about his grappling. I agree with the sentiment of keeping him away from like the Evloevs of the world at the moment after that loss, and at least letting him try to get a win back under his belt against a striker. And I think there's multiple fun options depending how high or how low you want to go in these rankings. But any of Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze, and even Edson Barbosa, we've never seen before, and I would be highly entertained by all three.
Yeah, love all those.